1. Hey everybody, thank you for joining us. This is one of our amazing admins and moderators in our group, Vishwa. He is a master of emotional integration and emotional intelligence. I know a lot of you have had questions about that, so if you have more questions after this, I recommend you check out the video that we did. We did a great interview and he did an amazing lecture for our group a few months back all about emotional integration and healthy emotional practices. Fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. So check it out on YouTube, and also you can message him and comment, and I know that he's will try to respond whenever he can. He's pretty busy, and if you're needing someone to guide or coach you through it, he's an excellent resource to work with. He is a Buddhist Acharya, master level of the Mahadriya Buddhist tradition. He's also a life coach. He teaches emotional integration and self-therapy. He's a pretty amazing person all around. I could go on for quite a while about him. He's a priest, he's a ReiKi master, a full-time Jedi. He holds Christian and Buddhist clergy credentials simultaneously. He's a very interesting fellow. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into it and kind of talk a little bit. Let's get to know him. So Vishwa, could you tell me in maybe 20 words or less what your personal philosophy is in life?
You know, I'm not sure I even have a specific personal philosophy. If it works, do it.
Okay.
That's and if it doesn't, stop.
I like that. So a lot of people want to know what the admin team does for work. So if you can maybe talk a bit about what you do for work, how you feel about it, and where you might see yourself in the future.
Well, a lot of people have jobs that they do, and doing what I do for a living is more of a calling. You have to really kind of be dedicated to doing it, or else you don't last very long at it. And it's very, very rewarding to me. A lot of people, they don't really see the reward. They don't feel the same thing that, that I get out of it. So it's okay. It doesn't matter if people like it or not. But what I do is I just get out there and I help people all day long as much as I possibly can. The people that I help are typically broke. So people who can pay, I encourage them to. If you can't pay, don't sweat it. I don't want to take money from people who can't afford it. The big issue for for payment is a lot of people want to say, well, you're all about the money, and they want to be critical and all that stuff. But the truth is, the utility companies don't take barter. My landlord does not take barter. They don't take barter for these things. I can't simply accept, cans of food or whatever. I have to have the cash. And, there was a time where that wasn't the case, where all you needed was the ability to subsist and you could trade for whatever you needed. And that time is over. That time has been over for a few decades now. And pretty much everybody in the world is on the same page with it. So, people who criticize, about doing something like I do for money, it's what I do. It's how I make a living. If you disagree with it, don't ask me for services.
Fair enough.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
If it works for you and you need my services, feel free to ask. If you haven't agreed with it in the past and suddenly you need something, ask. I'm really open to people asking for help. I can't always give the help that is needed, but I do what I can.
That's pretty awesome. Speaking of food, you mentioned cans of food. Could you talk a bit about maybe what your favorite foods are and kind of what your relationship to food is? Specifically, like, is there any kind of mind, body, spirit connection? How does it impact you? Things like that.
Food and I go way back. My family, as far back as I can remember, the guys got together and cooked. We when it was the guys' time, we kicked all the women out of the kitchen, and that was our bonding time. And where else can you have a whole bunch of guys using sharp implements and not going after each other? So,
I don't know.
Yeah. But all jokes aside, the fun part is I love to cook. I love making things. I love coming up with new recipes. I love the idea of food as a way to sustain the body. And as long as you're not poisoning your body, I don't see that there's really a lot of problem with anything that somebody decides to eat. I'm a flexitarian, which means I really enjoy my vegetables, but if somebody offers meat, I'm not offended and I'll eat it. I also have a medical condition that requires me to eat meat. And being a master level in a Buddhist tradition, a lot of people are like, well, how do you resolve that? And the simple part of it is the teaching in this particular tradition does not require vegetarianism. It is simply a do what's good for your body instead of trying to enforce things. We view the Buddhist idea of vegetarianism as a valid and very good teaching, but it's a teaching. It's not something that's supposed to be a lifestyle. It's something that has a specific outcome and a benefit. And the ultimate lesson for that is just be conscious of where your food comes from. Be conscious of what it takes for you to live. When you eat a hamburger, understand that you have had to kill an animal to eat that. You have had to kill several plants to eat that. This is death. One death that leads to further life. I call that the cycle of life, and that's a good thing.
I would agree with that. Hang on one quick second.
Sure.
So tell me, are you physically active? Do you practice movement or exercise? And if so, how does that impact your body?
I actually just got the okay from my doctor to go running at 10,000 feet.
Woohoo!
And for the metric people, that's 3,000 meters above sea level. So
all right.
At that level, there's about 70% the amount of oxygen at sea level. And so, people who run at that level, we're either crazy or we're completely dedicated to, our health. So, and I do it because I really love the clean air up there. I love the altitude, the feeling of being up that high. I love the experience, the different, because my body really feels different at that altitude when I'm running. If I run at sea level, I might get 2 or 3 miles, before I got to take a break. If I'm running at 10,000 feet, then that altitude, I might get a half mile. So
that's a difference.
And people look at me and they're like, dude, you've got a huge gut. How could you possibly run that far? And then I prove it. So
exactly. Way to go. That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I am classified on the medical system as obese, but I'm not like that morbidly obese or anything like that. But, I'm 10, 15 pounds over the obese limit. And to me, that's just good survival, because if I get into a camping situation and happen to run out of food, I've got a couple of extra days of store. It's not fun. It's not my preferred way to go, but, at least I can make it work.
I hear ya. Yeah, I think that's pretty realistic. So in terms of creative pursuits, what types of music do you love? Do you have any artistic or creative endeavors that you like, that you enjoy?
I make dubstep. I have a SoundCloud account. You can look
Oh,
me up,
all
Vishwa
right.
J, all one word. I do art. If you look at my Facebook profile, there's this yellow mandala kind of lotus looking thing that I did. And, that was entirely done in Adobe Illustrator. So I just kind of put it together at random and it just kind of worked. And then I copy pasted the, the other directions and it really, I thought it looked beautiful. So I posted it.
That's awesome.
Uh, I
Um,
I think that creative pursuits are vital, honestly, to spiritual development, and I think having both creative and realistic sides is vital to just being a human who lives among other humans.
I agree with you. Was it Carl Jung that focused on the importance of the intuitive people needed to work on their critical thinking skills, and the critical thinkers needed to work on their intuition to really become healthy and well balanced?
Yep.
All right, so switching gears a little bit here. Have you experienced racism or sexism in your life? And whether or not you have, like, what are your thoughts on those topics?
Wow, big thunder.
Got a storm
You
there.
know, I have experienced racism. I mean, everybody looks at me and they're like, "Oh, you're a white guy." Well, I'm actually an albino. I have albinism. Under certain lighting conditions, my eyes turn purple. Like you've seen red eye in the photo. Yeah, I get that, but in person, most of the time my eyes look blue.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, it just takes really specific lighting. And, it's a genetic mutation. Um, Light skin, light eyes, white hair, that's genetic mutation. So I can claim that I'm a mutant.
Yes.
So, for as far as people with racism, I mean, the stuff, for example, that happened recently in, what was it, North Carolina, with a bunch of racists basically attacking the people who were speaking out against them. That's kind of a big deal to me. I think the big problem with racism isn't simply the division of the races. I think the big problem is that it's hatred, and as hatred, we have a duty to kind of eliminate that. Um, and it's not just that we have to, squash the people and their ideas. We have to really teach people that hatred of other people just on the basis that they appear different is absolutely not, anything that people need. There was a time where we needed that. That was thousands of years ago. But we don't need that anymore. There was a time when we needed division of gender, but we've outgrown that. The need for it is no longer present. So we should do away with it. Um, there was a time where we needed to ensure that every house had a post to tie up a horse. Nobody rides horses anymore. We don't need that, so we should do away with it. And that's the whole point. If it's not working anymore, do away with it. There was a point when I say it was thousands of years ago that we needed to have those divisions. That's true. It was just good survival at that time. It was what helped humanity progress at the time. But we outgrew it, and we outgrew it so quickly. And yet people still decide, oh, well, they're different, so we should hate them. They talk differently, they look different, they think different, they speak differently, they create differently. the differences in people are things that we should embrace, not reject. So that was racism. What was the other part of the question?
Sexism.
Sexism, absolutely. Again, it's a device of hatred. It's not something that is necessarily even gender. It's just a hatred of differences. It's somebody is this gender, so we should, necessarily keep them, quote unquote, in their place. Men should always be strong, manly, and women should always be meek, submissive homebodies. Yeah, and this is not been a need for hundreds of years. So it's time we did away with it. Let's not hate anymore. Let's accept that people are free to, decide for themselves what direction they need to go.
Do you think it's fair to say that there are genuine differences between
Oh yeah.
males and females?
Oh yeah. But where biology ends, that's just a difference. That's not hatred based on a difference.
Yeah,
That's
that makes
not
sense.
that's not that's not, well, men need to learn to accept that women have all the power. That's not true. Neither should it be that women should accept that men have all the power. It should be a balance. And there was a time where that was the case. And gender roles were simply a role that was beneficial to the situation.
That makes
If it
sense.
doesn't make sense to the situation, why would we continue doing that?
Traditions die hard.
Tradition.
Yes. Oh yes. If I were a rich man. Now you're gonna have that song in my head.
Yeah.
So, do you like to read? And if so, do you have any books that when people say, "Oh man, what are your top 3 books you might recommend to someone on anything?" Like, what are some of your favorites?
Oh man.
I know, right? Like, how do you pick?
Well, I'm an avid reader. My library at home has something in the neighborhood of 750 books. My online library has something in the neighborhood of 250 books. And I've read every single one of them. So, I read a lot, but I'm really specific about what I will pick up. As far as fiction goes, reading, I am really a big fan of Michael Jordan, or Robert Jordan. Michael Jordan. Yeah, because the basketball star, he just, no. Robert Jordan.
You had me really confused for a second. I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
that's
Eye
very
of the World.
unexpected.
Eye of the World is the first book in the series that I like by him. He wrote some stuff that was in the Conans. He did some other stuff that was it was well written, but I wasn't really a fan. But when we got to the epic tale of the dragon and the dragon rising and the the dark friends and all that stuff, I fell in love with that whole series. I literally cried when I found out the guy died. I was really mourning the loss.
Oh,
And I'm really happy that they picked who they did to finish the series, because he's really not a bad writer. He's not Jordan. He's not the person who knew everything about it. And there were a couple of spots where I disagreed that this was where it needed to go. But then I thought, you know what? I wasn't picked to write this. So it doesn't matter if I agree or disagree. He did a good job. He really did. Because the disagreement is so minor. Like, even if he changed it the way that I thought it should go, it doesn't change the whole story.
that's good. You're not so much
So
of a purist that you're going to throw it out. That's good to hear.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
As far as nonfiction goes, I read books about writing. I read books about blacksmithing. I read books about criminal procedure. I read books about um, just survival, everything under the sun. I mean, I'm a voracious reader when it comes to that stuff.
that's
Um,
awesome.
and the reason for that is that I love to write. I don't have anything really published or even necessarily publishable, but I love to write and I just do it because I like to. Um,
I can't think of a better reason.
yeah, so,
It brings you joy. We
yeah,
did get a lot of questions from members on to talk about emotions and integrating them and being our authentic self even when emotions are really strong. Is there
okay.
anything you could say to integrating emotions to be our authentic self?
Practice. It's really that simple. Do it over and over again until you get it right. And accept that you're not a perfect human being. You're not going to be flawless. You're not going to even necessarily have an elevated point of view. You're simply going to be what you can be at the time based on the experiences that you've had. And when you recognize that something isn't necessarily beneficial, do away with it as much as you can. And yeah, you're going to slip up because old habits die hard. It's okay. Just accept that it's a slip up, resolve yourself again to not doing whatever it was. And, when that situation comes up, maybe you'll make it through again. So it's all about, trial and error. Um, life is an R&D process. We're always researching, we're always developing. We can't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be, but we can at least have some kind of idea about what direction it should go. And when we see that that direction isn't productive and we see that that direction isn't necessarily the best, then we can change it. And it's up to us individually to change our own lives. Being your authentic self is nothing more than that. It's about understanding that this is what I need to do for right now, because that's what my experience tells me is the right thing. If we know it's not the right thing and we do it anyway, then we're not being authentic. And when I say the right thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good choice. Sometimes it's just the least of the bad choices. And that's the best advice that anybody can receive is do your best.
I like that. And don't give up. Just
Yeah,
keep practicing
yeah.
no matter
And
what.
accept that you're going to screw it up, you know?
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
So for you, I know in a, you have some of your own difficulties as far as things you've dealt with in the past, being on the spectrum and different things. How do you
Yes.
connect and bond with other people?
Um, Generally, connecting is really difficult for me because of being on the spectrum. Um, when I try to connect, a lot of people are put off because I have this really amazingly solid focus. Um, and so I'm focused entirely on that connection. And it freaks people out. It really does, because they're like, whoa, what's he doing? Why is he trying to do this?
Super intense.
Yeah. Um, and some people are really, they're focused more on how can I make this work for me? How can I make this connection work for me? And so they try to make the connection something that you can use instead of something that simply exists. And those are the connections I tend to not pursue anymore. when somebody tries to use me, unless they tell me flat out, look, this is just for convenience. I'm cool with that. Just be honest.
Just be honest. Be upfront about it. All right.
Yeah. One thing about most of the people on the spectrum that I know is that we tend to appreciate directness. If you are indirect and you're kind of hinting that something is happening, and you're kind of, it's just not necessarily what everybody thinks of, then, most people on the spectrum aren't necessarily going to get it. And whatever you're talking about is not going to happen.
And just to clarify, when we're mentioning on the spectrum, we're talking about autism, the autistic spectrum,
yes,
to clarify for people that may not know. Yeah.
And I'm in the range that is called the Asperger's range. And so the autistic spectrum is, it's a large thing. And about 10 years ago, I guess it is now, I don't exactly remember, but what happened was they discovered that people who are in the Asperger's range actually have the same exact neurological things going on that people who are severely autistic have. So there's people who are actually autistic, and then there's people in the Asperger's range. They were originally seen as two different things. But they discovered that with that similarity in neurology, a lot of the same types of things that work for one will work for both. But it is a spectrum. There are a lot of differences, a lot of different ways that it manifests. And for most people on the spectrum, well, let's talk about most normal people. A normal person, quote unquote normal, haha.
Neurotypical?
Yeah, we call that neurotypical among the other autistic people. So neurotypical people have this kind of process where up to 80% of the information that they take in is processed subconsciously. Like they don't even realize that they're thinking about it. But people who are on the autistic spectrum process it all consciously because of delayed processing. And that delayed processing is necessary just because of the way that the brain is built, the way that it's put together. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the best that I can. That's the best I can do as far as what's said
and that's
about it.
Really good practical tip when working with people, that to just be very direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. What would you say that you are really passionate about, or what drives you, so to speak?
Oh man. To be honest, my biggest passion is spiritual stuff. Spiritual practices fascinate me. Another thing that I find, and it's an odd connection, is laser tag. The game of laser tag. It's like people are like, laser tag, that little kids game or stuff. Yeah. Well, the place that I go, it's an older crowd. Most of them have been playing since they were little kids and are now fully adults, and some of them are even ex-military now. So it gets a little challenging. But yeah, laser tag is something that I am just absolutely passionate about as well. So I have that spiritual side, and I have the practical side, and they're two different things. And sometimes they say, well, the fact that you have two different focuses means that you're probably not on the autistic spectrum. I've had somebody actually tell me that before. And no, it's two things that I'm focused on, and focused fairly intently on. So
it's like Call of Duty live in person.
Really?
So in practical terms, when you're balancing those two people, or those two focuses, as you put it, what are there times that you've just really hit a wall? Maybe it's a dark night of soul or something you were just really struggling with, of like,
Absolutely.
oh, and how did you overcome it?
You absolutely hit walls with everything. We don't live in a world that lacks them. All of those walls are ultimately self-imposed. We choose to live in the house that we live. We didn't build the walls, but we have chosen those walls. Even if we don't feel that we had a choice because we were forced into a living situation, we chose to accept that that was better than being out on the street. When we're out on the street, buildings still have walls. We still have all of those things that, they're things that either are for directing us, for protecting something else, or simply their intent is to prevent. And with the intent to prevent, it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's not necessarily, I'm going to be, what do we call that? It's not necessarily I'm stopping you from doing this. It's usually I'm stopping everybody from doing this. And I mean, that's really all I can offer as far as the walls. How do you overcome them? Every single wall is different. You have to look at it as something that is constructive and beneficial so that you overcome your own judgment about it. If you see the wall as something insanely negative, like, oh, they're just blocking me because they can, and they're doing it out of malice, and well, there are people who do that, but the people who do that are far and few between. At least in real life. On Facebook, they're everywhere, but in real life,
Right.
So my most recent wall, I just, in fact, today got told that half of my clients are leaving. They're jumping ship. They're going with somebody else who is, better qualified to handle their particular circumstances, at least they feel. And they're the only ones who get to choose that because, they're the ones who get to choose what consequences they have to their life, whether those are good or bad consequences. So I can't hold that against them. I can't be angry with them. I can't say, oh, you're just doing this because, and suddenly half of my income is gone in a day. And okay, that's okay. We can deal with that. It's not, oh, that's okay, it doesn't matter. It matters.
Yeah.
But it's okay for things like this to happen because usually they open the way for something better to happen.
That's a very optimistic way to view it.
But it's true. It's also just practical. It's not just optimistic, it's practical.
Yes.
And the best that we can do in life is to lean just a little bit toward the positive. We can't necessarily dwell there all the time. It's healthy to have a little bit of negative, response. It's healthy for the human side of us to have just this little thing of anger, or this little bit of negative reaction. It's not beneficial to lack that because it will make us seem completely inhuman to other people. And on top of that, it will also impact us health-wise. Certainly, I know people who try to dwell 100% in the positive and they are mentally ill.
Oof. Oh, yeah.
So
not good.
Yeah, and that is an observation, not really a judgment.
So if I could kind of sum up to see if I understand what you're saying, something really bad happens, there is an acceptance of, yeah, this is not okay, this is upsetting or hurtful or whatever it is, but at the same time you're leaning towards the positive of what positive could come of this? What could I learn from
Yeah.
it? So it's kind of
What
a both, a little bit of negative, but it's also a little bit of positive and balance.
it's not okay. It needs to be resolved. That's the whole point. It needs resolving. So how do I resolve this thing that's blocking me? Well, I mean, it's baby steps. It's what do I need to do first? Well, first I need to make sure that, I cut out everything that is just luxuries and not vital necessities at my home. Um, I'm over at my friend's house right now using the internet. So, yeah, I absolutely can't sit there and just wallow and dwell in the awfulness of something that happened. Action has to be taken, and it has to be the correct thing.
Would it be fair to say that you may still feel some negative
Oh,
feelings about it, but you're
absolutely.
basically saying, even though this feels really awful, I'm still acting. I'm not going to
Absolutely.
sit there and feel sorry. Yeah, it hurts, but I'm going to keep walking through that
Oh, it absolutely
negativity.
hurts. Absolutely. But if I sit there and just, if I just sit there and let it hurt, you know, if I do nothing and just sit there and say, oh, this injury, it's life, death, and I'm just going to, yeah. I mean, I go into this kind of drama of, of how does everything, how does it all work and how does it all fit together? Well, I don't have the answers to that. I don't know how it all works. But I can tell you that if I do nothing about it, it will never be resolved. Does that mean it's going to be resolved if I do something? No. But if I do nothing, that lack of a good result is a guarantee.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I think you've touched on it a little bit, but in terms of your spirituality, a lot of people would like to know, is there a label you ascribe to? Or if you could, just in one or two sentences, someone asked you on the street, what is your faith or what is your spirituality? How would you describe it?
Um, honestly, my faith is Judaism. I am a Buddhist by profession. My faith is in the Jedi path and the Force. That is solidly my belief, and it always has been. Well, I can't say always, but for the last more than 20 years, it has been. And I mean, I can't even tell people how serious I am about that, because a lot of people just laugh it off, and they're like, "Oh, you think you're this person who does telekinesis and can close doors from a distance and all this stuff." No, I'm real practical about it. But the Force is real. The Force is something that I thoroughly believe in. And somebody's like, well, you're just trying to convince me of the Force. Well, no, I'm trying to explain my own beliefs. I don't care if you believe in it, because that my faith doesn't require you to believe anything. If your experience allows you to believe that, believe it. If your experience does not, it's no skin off my nose.
I think that's a great way to view almost any belief or opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. And if people want to learn more, we can drop a link in the comments, because I do believe you have a Jedi Academy online, right? That explains a lot
Uh,
of this and people can
yeah.
learn more.
And I call it Jedi School.
Jedi School.
And there's three sides to it, actually. There's the main side, which is just basically an open conversation. Everybody is welcome to come in. I do have rules there. I hate having them, but trolls are a reality, and people who are trying to satisfy an agenda are a reality. So, we have to have rules that deal with that. then I have another section that is for more serious students of the path that I teach. And then I have a third section that is just for my personal students. So, and I have personal students who are Jedi. I have personal students who are, you know, other faiths. I have 2 personal students who are atheists. So yeah, I mean, I teach basically anyone, and I teach all day, every day. That's how I work. With laser tag, I teach. With my spiritual stuff, I teach. So I guess teaching might be my passion.
That sounds like a good one.
So
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. In terms of triggers, is there anything that triggers you, especially posts or topics in the group? And if so, how do you deal with that when you feel triggered?
you know, the biggest trigger that I've got, honestly, it's a really tough button to hit. Even when I tell people what it is, hitting that is really tough to do. But when somebody says something about a person, like this person is this way, and I have a personal experience that is definitely different than that, when I know for sure that what they're saying does not fit, it triggers me. I had a recent issue with an online troll with that, actually, and he was just trolling. But okay, trolls happen. I can let go of that after it's done. Do I have strong emotions about it? Absolutely. That's the definition of a trigger. But I also have to realize after a certain point that once that strong emotion passes, feeding into it to keep it going isn't healthy. Once the situation is done, it's done. Let it go.
So I don't know if you're like me in this, but when I feel that trigger or that onset of strong emotion, I've trained myself through practice, as you mentioned, to step away from whatever it is. That's what I'm always working on. I'm not saying I perfected that, but that's my ongoing personal practice. Is that something you do as well then when you feel it? Like,
Well, I mean, that's valid. I don't always do that. There are some times where the situation requires that I don't. It depends really on what the situation needs. Sometimes I will actually drive harder into it. And sometimes I'll even counter troll the person back.
I have done that too. I think it depends on the energy someone's coming at you with and their intent.
Right.
And there's some people that only get it by having it mirrored back. Yeah.
And that's something I'm really good at. I mean, you see the glow here. I'm a great mirror.
Oh yeah.
By the way, that's not intentional. The camera on my computer does that, and I've tried to even tone it back, and it just doesn't. I promise I don't glow in person like this.
It's just more proof of you being angelic. That's all.
Oh.
That's right. So is there anything you like or dislike about moderating in the group, or that you wish people understood about adminning?
You know, I wish that admins were not necessary. I wish we could all just have this massively awesome discussion.
I agree.
But at the same time, you know, there are people who will take it way too far. They're not as aware as they think they are. They think they're doing something that's beneficial to the world when in fact all they're doing is just making everybody pissed off. And so yeah, admins are necessary. I mean, I sorely wish they weren't. I wish we could do away with like 99% of the rules out there. But we're stuck with it because people are jerks.
I agree with you there.
Yep. I mean, it happens.
Yeah. A member asked, was curious, what draws you to respond to certain posts or insights or topics? And is it the need to know? Is it about just simply interacting with others, or is it about observing others and how they succeed or fail in certain concepts? What is it for you that draws you to things?
Oh, that's a broad question.
It is.
It really depends on the situation. What draws me in isn't the same every time. So in fact, I've seen somebody post in two different spots the identical post, and I responded to one but not the other. And somebody was like, "Why didn't you respond over here?" And I was like, "Because it didn't seem like I should." So yeah, it really depends on the situation. I mean, that's a hard question to answer so broadly.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, it is a broad question. All right, so how about something more specific then? What's something that you do now in your life that you maybe did as a child that you enjoy so much that you just lose track of time?
I didn't do it as a child, but as far as losing track of time, my writing.
Oh,
If I get into a writing project, like sometimes I'll be like writing and I'll write one little scene and I'll be like, oh crap, 6 hours have passed. I didn't mean for that. 3 a.m. Oh no. you know. Yeah, it's like I just kind of drop into this hole and everything around me ceases.
that's awesome. That sounds like you really enjoy it. What are your thoughts on happiness? That's a pretty common question. It comes up a lot.
Oh, another broad thing.
Well,
I
like
think,
maybe maybe how would you define happiness and how do you feel someone attains it, maybe?
well, I don't think happiness has a definition. I think it's just something we feel. And we all know what it is. Whatever we feel that makes us happy, that happy reaction is happiness. There are people who believe that they are happy by watching other people suffer. And there's a difference between laughter and happiness. There's a difference between enjoyment and happiness. And if you're enjoying another person's lament, you need to examine that, I think. As far as the secret to happiness, I don't think there's necessarily even a secret. I think it's eliminate what stops you from being happy. If something hurts a little, okay, that's just life. But if something continually hurts you over and over and over again, you need to get rid of it. It's not good for you. And that goes with relationships, that goes with, activities, foods, anything. If it's not beneficial to you, get rid of it.
That
If
sounds
it's,
simple enough.
yeah, and I
I like
try to
that.
keep it. I try to keep it as simple as I possibly can.
I
So,
appreciate that. Here's an easy, well, maybe not an easy one. Tell me about the last time you couldn't stop smiling.
last time I couldn't stop smiling. Well, the last time was actually watching my kids Christmas morning
Aw,
open up a PlayStation, like a brand freaking new PlayStation,
that would do it.
and just watching these kids go, ah! They just about died in heaven right
Oh,
there.
oh yeah.
So
That's a good parent memory for you right there.
yeah, and I mean, I literally I couldn't stop smiling the whole time. I was just like, oh yeah, Santa, you done good.
That's pure joy right there. Okay, tell me about a time that maybe you thought to yourself, wow, like I can't believe I'm actually doing this.
Today.
Okay,
Wow, I can't
so
believe I'm actually doing this. I finalized a plan that I've been working on for 3 or 4 months, thereabout, with regard to taking people for high altitude spiritual workshops.
Oh, wow.
I have resolved that I'm going to start doing that next year. I made the finishing touches on the plan. I sent it over to a friend of mine who's my business partner, and he loves it. He loves the idea. So, and
I
this
think it's
guy
an amazing
owns
idea.
a business.
That's great.
So,
Okay. Kind of a broad yet specific question to wrap up things. And we talk a lot about in the group about our vision, our culture of wellness of body, mind, and spirit, and then impacting and trying to change the world on different levels. How do you feel that we as a community could change the world for the better? And where do you feel you personally fit into that, as far as maybe something that you feel is a personal cause or actions that you're taking directly, or whatever comes to mind?
I always answer this type of question the same way. And that is, if you want to change the world, you have to first change yourself. You have to change your perceptions, your beliefs, your reactions, whatever it is that stops you from being the change that you want to see. And when Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And a lot of people think that just means, oh, well, you have to just fake it until you make it. And there is a degree of that, but that's not the whole thing. You have to make those genuine changes inside. You have to genuinely and authentically feel that what you're doing is the right thing. Because if it's anything less, people are going to pick up on that, and they're going to know that you're faking it. And they're going to say, this doesn't feel right. And so they're not going to join whatever it is that you're doing.
Ooh, that's a good one. I know for some people there's a tendency to focus on working on oneself, and kind of one thing I've noticed in spiritual communities especially, I'm not sure if apathy is the right word, but kind of I'm working on myself, I'm meditating, I'm sending out love to the universe, and they're not really connecting or doing outside of that. Do you feel there's enough value in just doing that, working on themselves, or do you feel it's important to also connect in some more direct, grounded ways outside of ourselves?
If you are not working on connecting to the world around you, you are not connecting. It doesn't matter if you feel connected. You are not in fact connected if there is not a connection. So you have to get out into the community. You have to do things. You have to, put out the effort. Um, and if you want the result, that's what you have to do. It's not a rule, it's a mechanism. It's just the way that it works. If you're so focused on what do I, what changes am I making, that you forget that those changes have an impact on other people, you can lose those relationships. And in fact, that happens very often. And I mean, we outgrow relationships anyway. That's just the nature of being human. But what makes a relationship valuable is whether or not we choose to keep it, even after it ceases being useful to us. So that's what makes the relationship valuable, is the connection, the actual connection to people. What you're talking about isn't really apathy. It's more of the blasé grounding. They're trying to just be unaffected by the world, and they're trying to cultivate, that's the word, they're trying to cultivate this this inner truth and beauty, and they're trying to see it in the world. And it's a good it's really a good thing. But if you're not fully aware, and that's where you stop growing, you need to get up off of your sofa, off of your chair, off of your tuchus, and get out there and just find something.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter who you connect to. What matters is the connection. My most recent connection, I connect to a homeless guy who's 78 years old and just discovered he has cancer. And he's gay. And his partner left him, finding out that he had cancer because his partner said, well, cancer is contagious. And he had all these kinds of weird beliefs about it. And I was just like, what the hell is your problem? And they'd been together for 15 years. I mean, that's not an insignificant amount of time. So, but I connected with this guy, and I'm a straight guy. All right. I mean, I'm not gay, but I connected to this 78-year-old gay guy who has prostate cancer, is probably going to die in the next 2 years. And I found a kindred spirit. I found somebody who I can actually talk to at multiple levels. And that's awesome.
That is awesome. And I really like what you said about it's not even who you connect to, but it's kind of the quality of the connection. Because I think a lot of people feel like they have to walk out and find some sort of best friend or community instantly, and there's neighbors, there's coworkers, or someone passing you in the store, and those are all potential connections right there.
There's a lot of people who subscribe to the lie that, you know, you have to connect only to people who are successful. Well, a man who's 78 years old, he's successful at life. He's lived a good long time. He's a survivor. That's a good connection. We have to monitor those connections. We have to spend time on them. And there are people who value, you know, what a person's net worth is a lot more than they value the person. I will tell people I have a negative net worth. You know, I owe something like, you know, low six figures. So,
I guess most people.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't bother me to have the debt. It bothers me not to pay it. It doesn't bother me to have it in the first place. Because it's just life. It's just living. And people who judge that, they say, oh, well, you've got such an awful credit score. Well, that's because of my asset to debt ratio. And if I had a higher asset, then my credit score would improve. Well, you're just using us for money. No, I've never asked you for money. You know, I actually had a rich kid's parents tell me that I was just using him for his money.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was a really awful situation.
Assumptions and judgments are never a good thing.
Well, and the problem is that, you know, there are people out there who would do that. And there are people out there who would definitely, you know, take his money and run. And they would gain his trust and they would work on that. And, you know, they might even try to convince him that it was in his best interest to hand all of his money over. And that's what cult leaders do all the time. So, you know, you gotta be kind of on the watch out for that kind of crap.
Yes.
So I understand that his parents had a good intent. You know, they love their son, obviously. But, you know, maybe give me a chance to say my case before passing judgment. They invited me over once. They spoke to me for about 15 minutes, and then they told him that I was no good for them because I was just a cult leader.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You'll find those people everywhere. Their belief is so strong. Good for him.
And the truth is, his parents then blamed me for him coming out. So and it's just silly because once you start blaming, once you start deciding that something, somebody is responsible for something and how dare they do this, once you start that process, it's really easy to continue it, and it's hard to break it.
Yes. Yes. I see a lot of people get stuck there and they just can't get past it.
You can't even
Well,
blame
they could,
yourself.
but they choose not to. Yeah.
You can't even blame yourself. You can't. If you sit there and worry about whose fault it is, you're not working on solving the problem. So
it's a waste of energy as opposed to it happened. How am I going to deal with it now?
Exactly.
Instead of, well, it must be your fault or my fault or whatever. I do sometimes look to myself because I like to own everything and to see where I went wrong so I can learn from it. Maybe that's considered blaming of, okay, I take responsibility for this. If I had said or done this, this wouldn't have happened. But I don't do it in a way that's shaming of myself so much as understanding the cause and effect of my own choices and actions. So, because I want to learn from it. When something hurts, you don't want to do it again.
Right.
So I think it's innate to think, is there a way
wisdom.
I can prevent this from happening
And
again?
that's how wisdom is produced. This hurt when I did it, so I need to figure out how not to do that again.
Yep.
So,
are there any parting words you'd like to say to the community, to the group, before we end off here? About anything else?
I will say this. Just because I have some people who are staunch supporters, I had somebody claim that I had groupies.
Whoa.
They were naming names at me and telling me,
Oh.
I was just like, dude, that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is I said something that resonated to them and they loved it and they want more.
Yes.
That's all it is. So if you want that, say something that will resonate with people and give them a truth to consider. It's really that simple.
I love that. I can relate. There's a lot of people that I would be happy to just follow around with if I could, because
right?
They're full of joy and purpose, and it just excites me to be around them. The authenticity, what they're doing, speaking their truth, and it's like, I just love this.
Yeah.
It's a natural response, like you said.
Yep.
All right. Well, I really appreciate everything that you brought to the group. I know that you've taken a lot of time that you don't always have to respond to people, especially when people are asking for help or get confused about certain things, and you come in and drop little nuggets of wisdom. And I just think that's really awesome, and I really appreciate having you on the team and just really helping to co-create an awesome community. So thank you from everybody.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate your input. I actually appreciate other people's input too. I mean, if you ever disagree with something that I've done and you know for sure that it was me, just message me. I mean,
Like
Vishwa.
Vishwa.
That's true for anybody in the group. I do check those messages as often as I can. But I'm off in the high Uintas in Utah, and the average altitude there is 10,000 feet, and the nearest cell tower is 32 miles. And so I don't have cell service out there all the time. When I'm out and away and doing the job, even though I love the job, that is a drawback. I'm not one of these people who is daily online. I sometimes wish I was because I've missed out on quite a few things because of that.
So what you're saying is if I message you and you don't get back right away, I shouldn't panic or get upset.
Right.
Okay.
There's a reason that
You're
I'm not
busy
getting
doing
back
things.
to you, and it's not necessarily that I'm just busy. It's that I'm busy and probably not near my computer, even though I sometimes accidentally leave the Facebook page open.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it'll pop up and it'll say that I've read the message, and I'm like nowhere near any kind
That
of
happens to me
reception for
all the
it. So.
time. I'll hit something by accident and I haven't even read it. And they're like, it says you read it, you didn't respond. I'm like, hey, I will respond as soon as I can.
Right.
Although for me, a really big emotional response is almost a sure way to get me not to respond, but that's my own trigger to deal with.
Well, and that's the way that you deal with it, is you step away, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to trigger Deanne, what's going to happen is you're going to trigger her, and she's going to step
I'm
away
going to
so
take
that you can deal
space.
with it.
Yes. So I can figure out myself, why am I feeling a tsunami of emotion right now? And then when it's calm, then I'll go back to it. Because if I try to act or say something within that moment, I'm going to regret it, hands down.
Yeah, I think that's wise, actually. But people need to understand that admins are humans.
Yes.
You know, we're not AIs. We're not
Yeah.
robots.
And we have much bigger things to do than feeling like we're controlling people or lording anything over them, because we've got pretty fulfilled, busy lives, and we're just trying to maintain a minimal atmosphere of respect and decency.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. And I look
Sure.
forward to chatting with you again in the near future as well as in the group.
Awesome.
All
Talk to
right.
you later.
Take care. Bye.